Always exciting to be welcomed back. Also, new thing for me, always exciting to be out of the house after 7 p.m. Because guess what, folks? It's 7:04. I'll be real peppy now. When you're leaving, you may see me looking like I'm falling asleep, and that's because I go to bed at 9 p.m. now. But everything is great, especially because guess what? Tonight is the 100th Nerd Night in Ann Arbor. And the coolest thing to me about it being the 100th Nerd Night is that that's all we have to do about it. Because Nerd Night is neat enough, we don't even need to pull out the confetti and the big parties and the bells and whistles to say, well, you should really come because it's the 100th and so you don't want to miss. No, you should really come because Nerd Night is great, and it's great every month. It's going to be great on the 101st. It's going to be great on the 112th, and so on and so on. But you're here on the 100th, so you can feel extra special with that. And tonight, we're going to learn more about violins, maps, and the memification of elections. But first, I want to thank y'all. I want to say thank you to the Ann Arbor District Library because we are the one Nerd Night that you don't pay a cover for, and it is because it is sponsored by the library. How cool is that? Very cool. It's also super cool because we get to do it at a nightclub. Thank you to Live for being our wonderful hosts every month and being willing to open early for a bunch of nerds to come and let us put cheers on the dance floor. It's great. And also, of course, we wouldn't be a Nerd Night if we didn't have you wonderful nerds in attendance, so thank you so much for that. And a huge thank you to our speakers tonight. But before I get to there, you may have seen it on your way in. Not only did you get those points from Eli's code. This one's not quite as much, but Smarty Pints will get you 150 points for attending. If you have any questions about these points and about Summer Game, I was honestly really tempted to make Summer Game be my Nerd Night Minute, and then I thought, too many people in the audience probably already know about it. But stop me on the break, and I'll answer any questions you have and talk your ear off about how fun it is that we get to play a game all community-wide all summer long. But tonight, we've got some great speakers. We have Steve Cheng talking about why do 17th century violins sounds amazing. Then we have Christina Liu talking about one open street map change plus one old Wikipedia bug is a rebranded Manhattan. And we'll finish off the night with Kimberly Clark talking about how to win an election using only GIFs. But first, it is time for your Nerd Night Minute. And tonight I'm going to talk to you about jalapenos. I love these little spicy pepper guys. One of the reasons that I love them is that they're really versatile. You can put them, they're good in anything. Another thing I really like about them is their spice level, it varies. Sometimes you get ones that are real hot, sometimes you get ones that aren't. It's not quite the like Russian roulette of a serrano, or not, excuse me, a shishito pepper, where 1 in 10 of them is spicy and the rest are mild. But for me, I know I've gotten a good spicy jalapeno pepper when I take a bite and a second later I'm hiccuping. But lately, the jalapeno has not been making me hiccup. And I wanted to know why. And it turns out I'm not making things up. Jalapenos, especially the ones you get at the grocery store, are becoming much less spicy. And that is thanks to the jarred salsa industry. So essentially what was happening, that thing I love about jalapenos where their spice level varies and you don't know what you're going to get, was really messing with these salsa companies because they were making batches of salsa, labeling them, thinking that they would be mild, but then some of those really hot jalapenos got in there and it ruined everything. And so in the 1980s, they partnered, not really partnered, but Texas A&M saw that this was an issue, and so they developed a thing called the Tam jalapeno. And this is a jalapeno that is specifically bred to be a mild heat. And the salsa companies loved that because they were able to take the, it's a word I can't say very well. Capsaicin, good news, the audience is filled with nerds. You can help me get through my tough words. Capsaicin, and they are, which is the thing that makes the peppers spicy. And so they are able to actually like distill it and put in the exact number of drops of capsaicin in the mild and the medium and the hot so that it's always the same. And they love it. And so the thing that was happening is that farmers were growing their jalapenos for the public manufacturing. That's their biggest market. So of course that's who they're going to market for. It also turns out that the Tam jalapeno is more bug resistant. So that's another reason why. But this was in the 1980s, and I wasn't born until 1988, but why am I tasting jalapenos that are less spicy now? Shouldn't this be the only thing I know? Turns out, no. Because there recently was the development of the Tam 2, an even milder jalapeno pepper. Great, thanks, folks. So when you go to the grocery store, this is what you see. And the things that you can notice, if you know, is that they are a little bigger than they used to be, and they're straighter. And the bigger and straighter peppers are the Tam jalapenos. So what do you do if you're like me and you like a jalapeno that has some heat? Well, you've got some options. First of all, when you're in that grocery bin, look for the ones that have a curve. Look for the ones that are smaller. I will say, sometimes you can't find any that way, so it's not the best solution. What I would suggest is growing them yourself. Because then you can get seeds. You can get either heirloom jalapeno seeds, or I'll say most of the jalapeno plants, even the ones I've bought at like Lowe's, are still jalapenos with spice, as long as they aren't labeled as Tam jalapenos. But let's say, like me this year, you know, had an infant and didn't plant your jalapenos in time, and they're only this tall. What do? And unfortunately, the best solution I've found is to switch to serrano peppers. Not the same flavor, but at least serranos are still spicy. And that is your Nerd Nite Minute. But I forgot, cite your source. I'm a librarian. I got everything from this talk from an episode of The Sporkful, which is a weekly podcast, but their episode released on May 19th was called How the Jalapeno Lost Its Heat. I've spoiled it all for you, but they had talked for half an hour. I talked for 3 minutes, so no, there's like more to it and more stories. I highly recommend it if you're looking to learn a little more about those peppers or other food and eating related interesting mysteries. But now, please join me in welcoming Steve Cheng. Steve also gets bonus points because he stepped up at the very last minute. Some of you eagle-eyed Nerd Nite folks might be saying, hey, wasn't there supposed to be a talk about bats tonight? And the answer is yes. Bats has been rescheduled to October due to some speaker conflicts, and Steve took his Nerd Nite minute and expanded it to a Nerd Nite proper. Steve, I'm so sorry. I had your bio in the speaker notes, and the speaker notes aren't on the scene, so I'll just say Steve's a real cool guy. He's worked many interesting lives. Currently, he is a history teacher. Excellent. I should have trusted my gut. He's a history teacher, but he also has a background in violin, has been playing for a large percentage of your life, so he's a good source for this. So join me in welcoming Steve Cheng.
Thank you. Little technical shift here. Maybe? Okay, what did I do? What am I doing? Just to make sure they're not in the audience. If you are or you show up late, that's fine too. So, what is this about? This is about 17th century violins and why they sound amazing. We'll talk a little chemistry, we'll talk a little bit of physics, we'll talk a lot about some famous performers, but who are we trying to kid here? This is actually just a really good excuse to put up a bunch of violin porn. So, keep this in the back of your head. If I said, who is the most famous violin maker? You're supposed to keep that in the back of your head. It apparently migrated to the front in your vocal cords. If you jumped the gun and said Stradivarius, you are in excellent company. And also if you do crosswords, because that's always the answer. But let's throw another name up there. Guarneri, anybody? Guarneri fans? Cool. Amati, any one of them? I just threw up Nicolo, but if you want to talk about any of the others, great. Give yourself an extra point if you actually know any of these names. Bergonzi, Ruggieri, Guadagnini, etc., etc., etc. And again, intro to violin porn. This is Anna Kiekemeyer, who is a great violinist who plays specifically the Wotan Guarneri of 1741. So today we're going to focus a lot of our attention on Stradivarius in particular. Incidentally, going back and forth, if you do the Latinized name, it is Antonius Stradivarius or Antonio Stradivari, depending on who you are. So to put us into a period of time, yes, I'm a history teacher. I like timelines. So what are we looking at here? When we're talking about classical violins and these great violinists like Stradivari, we're looking at a period that is roughly between about 1650 and about 1750 that we call the golden age of violins. And you can see all of these people that we just named appear sort of in this time frame. Yeah, Viam kind of ends up on the tail end of that. He's more of an 1800s guy. But again, this is the time frame that we're looking at. Now, before we start talking about violins, let's talk about what was not a violin. So to start out with, very brief and incomplete history, there are a long period of time where we have something that looks vaguely like a violin. It is a stringed instrument. It is played with a stick lined with horsehair. So going back into the 7th century, we have things like the rebab, and that's from everywhere. Central Asia, North Africa, the Middle East, migrates its way into Southeast Asia. You can see that on the left-hand side there. Thank you to the Metropolitan Museum of Art for most of these pictures. We get the Byzantine lira. That's on the right-hand side on the top. Again, sort of pear-shaped, but we're getting the basic idea. It's hollow. It's got holes in it. It's got strings. There's a bow involved. We have, if you're Chinese, we've got the erhu or the hushin, which is coming into China from the Mongols, more or less, but probably exists even back to the Song Dynasty in the 9th century. So again, these are all stringed instruments. What's unique about them that's not violin-like? How you play them. They're all played on your knee, which kind of makes sense for the Mongols. They're riding around on horses. They want to be able to play at the same time, and they've got horses, hence horsehair. So that's our starting point. Now, once we get into roughly the 12th century, we start looking at some other instruments, and we get this name that you recognize. If you're English, it's the fiddle. If you're German, it's the fiedel. If you are French, it's the vielle, which is also where we get the name violin from once it goes through a couple different languages. But now we start seeing something that is at least looking more violin-like. It has a top plate, it has a bottom plate, it had ribs on the side, it's kind of boxy. Go another century forward, 1514, we get this thing called the lira di braccio. Why is it called the braccio? Because it's made to play with the arm. And so now we get something that is box-like, played under the arm. Move forward into the 1500s again, 1550. Finally, that guy Amati, Andrea, not Nicolo, comes up with this thing that is recognizable as the modern violin. There's a couple other people involved in this process, but we'll give him credit. And here we have an example of that first violin from about 1565. So again, this is that progression of time to getting to a bowed instrument that's played under the chin using the arm. And here we are by about the 1500s. Now let's talk about that guy Stradivari. What about him? Well, 1644, maybe-ish. Birth dates are a little questionable. He is born in Cremona, Italy, spends his rest of his life there. And Cremona, if you know anything about violins, is kind of the heart and soul of all these awesome violins from the 1700s and into the 1800s. Why? Who knows? But he's a student of Niccolò Amati, or is he? This is the conspiracy part. He never actually appears on any of the documents that say this was a student of Amati or this was one of his apprentices, but we'll give him credit. He makes Amati-looking violins, and he says he was, so okay, fine. Now, by 1666, as a fresh young man of 22, he's completed his apprenticeship, he's working under his own name, he's putting his own label on his instruments, and he goes through a number of different periods. In the 1690s, he starts doing this thing called the long pattern violin, where the box is about an inch, half an inch, 12 millimeters longer. And then he goes into what's considered his golden era. So when you think about a Stradivarius, chances are you're thinking about that gold period, 1700 to about 1720. And this is where he makes those magnificent instruments that we think about. Now, through his lifetime, again, he is working for an extremely long period of time. He makes about 1,100 instruments, mostly violins, but also violas and cellos, of which about 600 or so are still in existence, a lot of them in museums and private collections, but that happy handful still being played. Now, what do we know about Stradivarius violins? If you know anything about them besides that they sound great, you also know they're really expensive. How expensive are they? Well, I'm glad you didn't ask. The Baron Knoop violin from 1715 sold for $23 million just this year to an anonymous buyer. It was last sold for $2.75 million in 1992, so forget the Bitcoin, go for this sort of thing instead. Now, here's the physics lesson. How do you make sound off of a violin? Well, I mean, you pull the bow across the strings. Why does that work? And here I have to give a shout out to former professor and chairman of strings at the University of Michigan, Andrew Jennings, my old violin teacher, because God help him, when I started taking violin from him in high school, he made me write a paper on how the violin makes sound. And this is what happens. So, you bow the string, which is to say you drag the horsehair across the string, it vibrates the string. The string vibrating rocks the bridge. That's the piece that supports the strings. And here's this cool GIF that I found that shows exactly that. What does that do? Well, rocking the bridge rocks the top plate, often made of spruce wood. That then translates into the back plate, which is usually made of maple, through the sound post. That's that thing that is sitting inside the violin just behind the bridge. And that creates a bunch of vibrations in an air cavity. And thanks to the German guy named Helmholtz, we know that that will create sound vibrations, which then get transmitted out or conducted out through the holes in the side, which we call F-holes because they're F-shaped. Weird, right? And that creates sound. What kind of sound are we talking about? If you really want to get into physics, 440 hertz is the A string. That is the second one over from the right if you're looking at it from the top. Everything else is in 3:2 ratios. You can do the math, but that's the numbers if you really, really care that hard about it. Now, what else affects the sound quality? Well, a lot of things. Number one, how good are your strings? You can buy some cheap stuff. You can buy some good stuff. You can buy some really expensive stuff. Is it steel? Is it metal wound around a synthetic? Is it metal wound around a natural material? That's going to have some differences in how the instrument is played and what it sounds like. String material and quality is a big factor in that. Your bow, you can go on Amazon and find a $50 bow, or you can go out to a violin store and, spend several $1,000s on that. It does make a difference. Tension that you're keeping in the string, in the bow, the quality of rosin that you're using, but probably most important, the performer skill. If you give me a great violin, I will sound a certain way. If you give it to a virtuoso, they will sound better. Now, what is it about the Stradivarius that makes it sound so good? This is just a cool drawing that I have no idea what it means. So Joshua Bell, great violinist, kind of one of the major virtuosos of the time period, said this violin, his Stradivarius, has the most amazing combination of sweetness, power, richness, perfect blend of all these qualities. Anna Sophia Butcher, also a great violinist of the same time period, says depth of color, dynamic range, tiger-like quality. I have no idea what that means. But she says powerful roaring voice if needed. A lot of people will use the word silvery. Also, I have no idea what silvery means in a sound, but enough of that. Let's actually listen. So this is Joshua Bell playing the Meditation from Thais by Massenet, 1894. He plays the Gibson X-Cuban and Stradivarius from 1730. Quick note, a lot of the names of these Stradivariuses are because somebody famous owned it before him, so this will probably eventually become the Gibson X-Cuban and X-Bell. curiosity, how many of you have heard of Stradivarius before, either in real life or was that your first time? How many of that was your first time? Amazing sound, isn't it? Now that's cool. Let's hear something a little bit more technically challenging. This is the amazing Itzhak Perlman, probably one of the most well-known violinists. He plays the Swal Stradivarius from 1714. He's owned it for about 35, 40 years. This is probably one of the most technically challenging pieces of the violin repertoire. It is Zigeunerweisen by Sarasate. So here we go. Yeah, he's pretty good. Now, with that in mind, what is it that makes that sound? Why does the Stradivarius sound like the Stradivarius? And there's a couple different things. Yes, more violin porn. There's a couple things. So people will make the argument, maybe it has something to do with chemistry, the way that the wood was treated, the varnishes, the things that they put on the wood has something to do with it. Okay. There's also an argument that geometry has something to do with that. Each violin is made uniquely on a pattern by the luthier themselves, and maybe that has something to do with it. We know that Stradivarius violins have been copied but are different in certain ways. And one of my personal favorite arguments, climate change. Let's start with a climate change argument. So, there's this thing called the Little Ice Age. That is a period where the Earth temperature dropped in the 13 to 1800 period when those trees would have been growing that he's using in the 16 and 1700s. And what happens? Well, trees grow differently. They grow slower, and theoretically the tree is probably a little bit more uniformly dense rather than something that grows in a hotter climate where there is some differences between growing patterns and you end up with some different densities. And thanks to the wonders of modern technology, we've took some CT scans of some of these things, and we've studied them. So if you look at this image down here, we've got the top plate of a modern violin. Darker is denser, lighter is not. This is a Stradivarius or a Cremonese violin from that time period, and you can see there is clearly a difference between those. How different are they? Well, this is a graph of differential in density, so how different is one area from the next. And you can see way up top, this is a modern violin, kind of all over this area is one of the Strats. So again, clearly there's some density differences. Now, does that make a difference in the sound? Maybe it does. Maybe the sound propagates through, it vibrates differently, and it causes a different sound that we simply cannot reproduce today. Option number 2, let's go into geometry. Any math nerds around here? Who's a Fibonacci fan? Woo! Yay! So there's an argument that people have made that one of the things about the Stradivarius violin is that he comes closest to that 1.6 to 1 Fibonacci golden ratio in the structure and the sizing of his instrument. And if you look at this picture over here, this is an Amati violin. Violins are designed basically around 4 basic circles, the side waist bouts here, and then the top and the bottom of the body itself. And in this image, this green is the Stradivarius. This, well, it's supposed to be blue. Blue is the Amati by comparison. You can clearly tell there's a difference in the sizing, in the shaping of the instrument. On top of that, Baroque violins of the period. This is the bass bar that goes under the left side of the fingerboard, if you're looking at the violin from the top. And you can see this is, and you can't really see the numbers, but I'll tell you, 6.6 millimeters, 12 millimeters. That's a 50% difference between a modern and a Baroque style bass bar. The width, 4.5 versus 5.5, so about a 20% difference. So there are clearly some differences. Here we're looking at the arching, and this blue line is the arching of the box itself. So clearly there are some differences. But one of the more well-studied stories here is the chemistry. And I grew up in Midland. My parents were chemists, so I'm a chemistry nerd too. So starting in the early 2000s, a professor named Joseph Nagaveri, and I found it amusing that Emily had mentioned Texas A&M. Texas A&M rears its head again. He was a biochemistry professor, also a luthier himself, and he started saying, you know what, I think it's the wood treatments. And so there's been a number of studies that look at the wood, soaking the wood to prevent things like insects, wood rot, fungus development, moisture control. And so by studying samples of these instruments, they found, hey, there's a lot of metal sulfates left behind that are residues in the wood. So aluminum, calcium, copper, things like that, that were possibly used as preservative agents, used as desiccating agents and things like that. And again, we're looking at something like that. Now we're looking at microscopic studies. A 2021 study said, what does this look like under a microscope? And again, images are a little bit hard to see. This is the Stradivarius, very, very uniform. This is an Amati from a century before, where you can see there is some structure that's in that wood. And again, this is at the microscopic scale. This is a modern violin, even more structure that's still visible there. So maybe that has something to do with it. And again, there's a lot of things that we're finding there. 2022, let's take a look at this at the micron level. There's this white line here that is a layer even between the wood and the varnish that's on top of it. So maybe it has something to do with that. In any case, there's a lot of research, and this is probably one of the biggest areas where people are looking at these violins and saying, what is it about them? Maybe it's this. Now, all of that's fine and good. And what do we have? Maybe climate, maybe the woodwork itself, maybe the chemistry. But at the end of the day, is the Stradivarius really that much better than a modern violin? How many of you think that if you played a Stradivarius and you played a modern violin, do you think you could tell the difference? If you were a professional violinist, could you tell the difference? No. In 2012, at the Indianapolis International Violin Competition, the Olympics of Violin, they got 10 soloists to blind taste test, yes. We don't talk that much about that experiment. Violinists are a little weird. And this is the part where Joseph Curtin, who is a Ann Arbor luthier and one of the best in the world, honestly, they had this study done. They tested 6 modern violins and 6 classical violins, of which 2 of them were Strads. The most popular violin for these professionals was a modern violin. The least favorite of all 12 was a Strad. However, one of the things they noted is that modern violins project better. And so sometimes loud means it sounds better to everybody. Oh, you can't understand what I'm saying, but if I repeat it louder, maybe you will. Or not. So if you equalize the sound and use recordings, Strads have a slight preference. So at the end of the day, maybe it's just all in the name? So to return to our original question, why do 17th century Italian violins sound amazing? What I'm going to go with is they don't. Unless you believe that they do. And so picking a violin is a matter of the performer and the instrument that they choose becoming an extension of themselves. And so, with apologies to J.K. Rowling, maybe the wand chooses the wizard. That being said, I'm going to go back to my 1752 German Christian Friedrich Meinel violin. That's why he was on the timeline first couple slides. That is my lovely instrument there. And if you are interested in reading more about these studies, here you go. I will also point out that if you are interested and liked the sound selections that I picked, I didn't actually pick them. This is our cat, Jimmy. She was sitting on my lap as I wrote this presentation, and What you hear is whenever she perked her head up to listen to the next selection, that's the one that got picked. All right, folks, you can listen to this. Come and tell me if you know what this song is. It's kind of nerdy. However, we've got a 10-minute pause here before our next presenter. It is about 35 after, so we'll figure we'll start at 7:45. Go refill your drinks. Come and talk to me if you want to nerd out about violins. Thank you very much. last song was. If you thought it was Indiana Jones, you would be correct. That was Anna Sophie Mutter playing with John Williams and the Boston Symphony Orchestra, and that was Marion's theme from Raiders of the Lost Ark. All right, welcome back. Next up, I also do the announcing things. We have Christina, who is, and this is a wild biography, a ceramicist based in Ann Arbor with a background in pastry and web development. Hopefully you're not getting those things overlapped in inconvenient ways. Finding open collaboration systems on the internet very, very fascinating, as do we all. And hopes that this talk will encourage people to peek under the hood of the websites and applications we use every day. So, Christina, come on down.
It's me. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Steve, so much for the introduction. I'm so excited to be talking here at Nerd Nite with all you lovely folks about how one new OpenStreetMap change combined with one old Wikipedia bug resulted in Manhattan looking a little strange. But first, a little bit about me. I've had a Wikipedia account since 2009. I made it at the end of middle school when one of my classmates and I looked back on our middle school years, realized our middle school Wikipedia page was lacking, and we decided to go in, add the essentials like extracurriculars, notable alumni, our rival middle school colors. The whole page got deleted a week later. That's fine. It's fine. Apparently there's a rule in place where Wikipedia doesn't allow middle schools to have their own dedicated page, but it'll live in my heart. When I'm not looking at Wikipedia, I'm making pottery up at Clayworks Studio on Plymouth Road. We're actually going to be at the art fair next week, so if you're in the area, stop on by. We're going to be in the activity zone, kind of between Hill Auditorium and the League. If you're out in that area at all for the A2 Summerfest, same place. Lots of fun. And, oh yeah, sorry. Hi, everyone. And last but not least, I have a background in web development. I'm pretty sure my interest in Wikipedia and being able to edit the internet kind of propelled that interest forward through college and through a fledgling career in web development. So onward to the talk. It begins with, as any other story, Ludwig Mies van der Rohe, the German-American architect, pioneer of modern architecture, because I was eavesdropping on a conversation at dinner, and I decided to look up who this person was, scrolled through the Wikipedia page, found the Seagram building, went down the Wikipedia rabbit hole, went to that page, and noticed, I got my little pointer here, Manhattan looking a little strange. This is on English Wikipedia, but the labels were not in English. So yeah, what happened to Manhattan? I then went to the Wikipedia pages for a couple other pages, such as the Flatiron Building, the World Trade Center. They were both looking similarly funky. And last but not least, Apple Park in California had a completely different map system. It didn't have all the labels. Notably, it wasn't on OpenStreetMap. So I decided to focus back in on Manhattan and on OpenStreetMap. And it really was just Manhattan. Brooklyn was fine, Queens was fine. Manhattan was a little strange. So how do I begin to diagnose what on earth is happening here? I started with typing some of the labels into Google's Translate, like this weird transliteration of Kips Bay. Google had no idea what was going on. It suggested It suggested the language could have been Albanian, Bosnian, Hungarian, Ukrainian. That wasn't really giving me a very specific lead on what to do next. And maybe in another life, the talk would have ended here. I had tried to go down a route, couldn't find anything, and maybe I would have given up. But then I texted a friend who's interested in really weird internet things, and I looped her into this. And so now I had an accomplice digging into this weird internet phenomenon with me. Texted her frantically, hey, you're better at digging into weird, obscure internet things than I am. Why is Manhattan looking kind of weird? So approach number 2, I had mentioned earlier that Manhattan, that the buildings from Manhattan were that the maps for the buildings in Manhattan were rendered with OpenStreetMap. So I decided to instead type Kips Bay, spelled a little bit weird, into openstreetmap.org. And what that got me was a node, which is just anything on a map, really. And within this node, there's a change set history. So for everything on OpenStreetMap, you can see what somebody added at what point in time for the entire history of that thing. So on May 3rd of 2024, someone had gone in and added several labels in Serbian written with the Latin alphabet into about 60 places in Manhattan. You can see here a paginated list of all the places, and then you can see here in the very hard to discern rectangle that it kind of covered, the entirety of Manhattan. So now in my very amateur investigative journey, I've started building out this timeline, and so far all we've got is just one point. On May 3rd in 2024, someone added a bunch of labels in OpenStreetMaps in Serbian. I decided to dig a little bit deeper. I had mentioned that for this node, there's a change set. Within this change set, you can add comments. Someone else had added a comment saying that these labels seemed more like transliterations rather than translations. Are you sure that they're the correct names? They were sure that they were, but most importantly, the person that left this comment also had a smiley face in their bio, and they also said that if you had any questions or concerns to reach out to them. So I had a question and or concern about why Manhattan was looking a little weird. And within 6 minutes of reaching out, they said, hey, I'll look into this. And then 30 minutes after that, they're like, hey, I figured out what was up. In 2018, there's a bug report filed on Wikipedia about how these maps are rendering the wrong labels sometimes. But prior to May 3rd, there weren't a lot of labels on OpenStreetMap that were using this Latinized version of the name. It was really only on May 3rd where that one guy added 60 labels in Manhattan that I think it started to become a little bit more visible. Oh, and then all the while I was also updating my friend about what was going on and how DMing a stranger on OSM worked. Yeah. So what exactly is going on the Wikipedia side? There are 3 things that I kind of wanted to touch on over the course of this talk. The first being Cartotherian. This is the system that Wikipedia uses that kind of communicates between OpenStreetMaps and the page itself. So if you go to any page and it has a little thumbnail of a map, that's Cartotherian telling Wikipedia, hey, render just this area at just this zoom level and show that on the page. Up until June 2024, there was there's logic in place to prioritize Latin or languages with the Latin suffix over any other language. So for our Serbian friend over here adding all these Serbian labels to Manhattan, that was what was being shown in place of the English name across all, or at least on English Wikipedia, I believe across other languages as well. And another piece of the Wikipedia puzzle is the system called Fabricator. This is Wikipedia's bug reporting system. For folks following along at home, if you Google Fabricator, you probably won't be able to see the whole Wikimedia site because it doesn't seem to be indexed by Google. But if you're Googling Fabricator, follow the Wikipedia page Fabricator, and then follow the Wikipedia project page, then you'll be able to start looking at specific bug reports, such as the one from May 22nd, 2018. So, May 22nd, 2018, bug was created. About a month later, the report itself gets vandalized. Someone comes in, edits the name, edits the description to a bunch of garbled nonsense. Standard internet fare. About a month after that, someone comments on the bug report, kind of trying to help it along, trying to figure out what is going on, trying to figure out where the problematic code actually lives that was causing maps to display a little bit weirdly. About a year and a half later, the investigation is still ongoing. 2 years after that, someone manages to find the code. So at this point, we're about 3.5 years after the bug was originally reported. Almost 2 years after that, someone else notices that the link to the problematic code didn't work anymore, so they just update the link. But then on May 8th of 2024, which is after May 3rd of 2024, which is after all the Serbian labels were added, somebody noticed that the problem was becoming worse and worse over time because they had navigated to a Wikipedia page for a place in Manhattan. And then on May 9th of 2024, so about 6 years after the bug was originally opened, that was when the first immediate proposal for, hey, let's fix this, was made. And on June 5th, someone entirely new to the discussion, chimes in on the original bug report to say, hey, Manhattan's still looking weird. And then the third piece to Wikipedia that I think, this is all speculation, but I think it's kind of relevant, is featured articles. If you've ever been to Wikipedia, on the main page, the very first article you see, that is the featured article. They're usually, I don't know the exact science behind it, but they're usually expected to be a certain quality. They're expected to be good, and of course they get a lot of page views. So when there are two featured articles that come out that are places in Manhattan that have Manhattan looking a little bit weird, that's probably going to raise some questions and raise some alerts. But one thing that I wanted to point out was that on May 10th, so we have our Serbian labels. On May 10th, we have a building in Manhattan featured on Wikipedia. On May 9th, that was when the proposal for the code change happened. And you may say to me, well, May 10th and May 9th are not the same date. That's true. But featured articles go live on Wikipedia at midnight UTC. So that's approximately, at least in the States, like late afternoon to evening-ish, depending on where you are. So this is all speculation, but I think this is not a coincidence. I think because there was a featured article for a page for a location in Manhattan while this bug was live, that led to that code change being proposed. So back to our timeline. where do I come in? At the end of I don't do anything. Everything was already done by the time I got there. Somebody else had already merged in a change. The only thing that was left to do was just wait for the bug fix to go live. But what I really enjoyed about this whole process, and the reason why I'm giving a talk today, is, well, one, it's archived. If you go on the Wayback Machine and select a snapshot for a Wikipedia page in Manhattan between May 3rd and June 27th of 2024, you can see Manhattan looking a little weird. I think it's kind of neat that this little bit of internet history still lives on. Because of, I think, Wikipedia's philosophy combined with OpenStreetMap's philosophy, I was pleasantly surprised along the way at how much information I was able to find just by poking around. Like, I didn't really need to authorize myself or authenticate myself. I didn't really need to say, hey, I'm a person of importance. No, I'm just somebody on the internet using systems on the internet that are open to everyone on the internet. I've heard from friends that editing Wikipedia can be a little bit daunting, or trying to understand Wikipedia can be a little bit daunting, and I agree, but I think it's, I think I might also just be a little bit biased because I've had a Wikipedia account since 2009, but where's the woo from? Thank you. But I was pleasantly surprised at how much information I was able to find along the way, either just straight up available to me or from friendly strangers with smiley faces in their bios that were willing to answer my very long-winded questions. And also, most importantly, I think it's nice to have a friend that's into weird internet phenomenon. Thank you so much, Sneha, for egging me on and letting me see this whole thing through. So, in conclusion, I just think Wikipedia is neat. And that's it. Thank you.
I think we've got time. Whoa. Don't stand in front of the speaker. Rookie move. I think we have time for, if anybody has one maybe question. We can probably do two.
Up first, yes. So the question was, yeah, I know that Wikipedia articles are open source, but like, is it also built on open source systems all the way down? And the answer is, yeah. Yeah. Do you have another question? Oh my God. No, okay, yeah, sorry. So yes, you can, yeah, there are approval processes, there are review steps. I left that out of the slides for the sake of scope, but yeah, you can't just write something on your computer and then expect to see it on Wikipedia the next day. It doesn't, no, not quite that. As we've seen with our slide, it could take up to 6 years for a change to go live. Do you have time for another question? One more question, yeah.
What's your favorite Wikipedia article?
Oh no. Oh, God. I feel like that's a question for Annie of Depths of Wikipedia. What is my favorite Wikipedia article? Oh no. I'll have to think on that. I'm so sorry.
You can maybe ask her in about 10 minutes when she's had some time to think about it. And with that in mind, we've got about 10 minutes of a break here. We'll get back started at 8:15. So go refresh your drinks, tip your bartenders, refresh, have a good break. And one more hand of applause. All right, welcome back for Act 3. Hopefully you've had a chance to refill your drink, say hello to our fine bartenders, and tip them. For our third act, we've got Kim Clark, an artist, entrepreneur, activist, former legislator, and as the founder of Lolico Design Studio, Kim blends creativity, activism, and tech to build community through unexpected mediums. This is an amazing talk name. I'm just going to throw it up here because it's so cool. Okay, I have to ask. Are you a GIF person or a GIF person? There are some strong feelings about that. Are you stirring up or riling up a crowd? Both, yes. So, without further ado, please welcome Kim Clark.
I am terrible with microphones. I forget they're in my hand, and then so sorry in advance. Also, the very first time I've ever done this in my life, and I'm terrified. And I'm wondering if I should be looking at the little computer or the big one, but I think I can see this one. Okay. My name is Kim Clark, and this is my presentation, How to Win an Election Using Only GIFs. Of course, this is me being hyperbolic. I don't know, maybe I wouldn't give it a go again, but I do think it is possible to change communities using the language of the internet. And so that's kind of what I want to get into based on my experience diving really deep into politics in my community. So a little bit about me. I'm a local business owner. I just opened up Lolico Design Studio. Thank you. It's a creative space where you can go and hire someone to do something. We offer a lot of textile services. I myself specialize in furniture restoration and upholstery, so if you have anything, we have a sponsor a student program where you can pay for the cost of classes and materials, and this student will do the work under my guidance. 100% of the time it turns out professional, and the student themselves gets access to the free education, plus they make 50% of the profit. A lot of these students move on to doing this professionally for themselves, in which they can remove themselves from my care, do it for themselves, or pay me $300 a month to use the studio and collect their own profit. And then they learn how to market themselves, I can't teach them how to run their business. I'm not that great at it yet, but we do teach them a lot about how to make money for themselves. And manufacturing is coming back to the United States, and the rug's being pulled out from underneath us, and we're going to be expected to work for a lot less money. So I'm trying to train the next generation of people to manufacture these things out of their garage, to be reusing materials, to bring back the trades, because clearly that's what's coming back to the United States. So thank you. That was more than I intended to go into, but I appreciate it. So I'm also a marketing consultant. I do less of that now. I usually take on 1 or 2 larger jobs a year because I work 7 days a week. But marketing consulting is easy for me because of my experiences. I began marketing consulting after I left college 2 semesters before I graduated because I made it. I was making $25,000 a year. And it was an exciting time for me. I was like, I don't need school. I can just go into marketing. So I learned a lot. I worked I made rewards programs for independent grocery stores. So, but not to the level that Meijer is or Kroger, to the level of data that they collect on their customers just when you walk in the door and the heat maps of how you travel the store. Not that in depth. But what we did do was we found independent grocery stores who had POS systems, but they don't typically do anything with that data. And we give them a front-end solution to a rewards program without them ever having to touch the back end. So I automated myself out of a job. And then I went into consulting other businesses to show them what digital tools are out there to automate different positions in their jobs so that if they can't afford the staff to do it, that they can take care of some of these administrative tasks on their own. And that is a lot of running a small business. Your life and time and money is sucked away in the administrative tasks. And so if you're like a one-person job and you actually are doing very well, it's like the hardest thing in the world. And I had to close a business before because we got so busy we couldn't keep up. And that was sort of what led me to teaching upholstery, which was being able to train people so that I could get back to doing it again and get back to opening my business again. So that's where I am today. So outside of that, I'm dedicated to serving my community. I'll go into a lot of that through here about my community service. And I was an elected official from 2019 to 2021. Oh, I'm sorry. I got ahead of myself with the pictures. So this was part of my marketing consulting, was to find ways to use your internet engagement to bring it into physical engagement to your establishment, to your community, create quality of life programs. And so a lot of my experience over the past 15 years is finding ways to bring members of the community together, whether it's like a different niche, like for me, I would do a lot of art galleries, so people who are into art would come to that, or whether it was for different elected officials. I was a part of the arts board, so we brought a lot of these activities into the community that were accessible and like usually free, but mostly accessible for people to get into, to sort of bring people into the space and find them from the internet, because it's infinitely easier to get to people that way. So I got into volunteer work pretty early on. Like as a kid, I always wanted to give back. A lot of people took care of me as a kid. I was a foster child. So I always wanted to sort of like pay it forward in that way. I started my philanthropy when I started my first roller derby league. And Flynn, thank you very much. It was the third league in the state of Michigan to get started. We were the Flint City Derby Girls. I was on the Flint River Floaters. We used that organization to create a nonprofit so that we could use our platform and our shows to raise money for organizations in the community that help bridge disparity gaps. I was 27 years old. At the time, I was a college student, and then the recession was getting started, and nobody could afford to do it. So we created a club on campus, because if you do that, the campus will give you money for your club. And that allowed us to pay the dues of everybody who was getting involved. And when we did that, we were using, who remembers Yahoo Groups? Yeah, everybody. So we were using Yahoo Groups to connect with like other derby leagues, to make sure we didn't all use each other's derby names or like do bad derby etiquette. It was a weird time, but it was a niche community where we could like find people, like-minded peers. And so at that time, we told them what we were doing in our college, and I was able to connect 35 different leagues to their universities so that they could create clubs on campus and get through too. I don't know if you guys have looked up a roller derby lately, but I think there are hundreds of leagues in the state of Michigan now. And they're trying to get into the Olympics. Like, they have national competitions. The Ann Arbor Derby Dimes are highly ranked in the state of Michigan. They're one of the best teams. So it's like incredible to see how this like I was into it for the wrestling aspect of it. Like the first time I saw roller derby, I was like, yes, I need to do that. It was very similar to my feeling when I came here. I'm terrified right now. I've never done this before, but you guys are being great. But like when I saw roller derby for the first time, I was like, that's me. That's what I need to do. And I found a lot of community in roller derby because we were people who like found a lot of like-minded things. And so we connected in that way, but we were intergenerational. It was like young people. We had people in their 70s playing roller derby. We had lawyers, we had doctors, we had people of all different walks of life. It was one of the most incredible experiences. So I've always sort of found myself using the thing that I'm into to find a way to get it to like get other people involved or to help other people. So what else we got here? I think when I was in office, we started several nonprofit organizations and things when we started entering the COVID crisis. so that we could help bridge disparity gaps as well. One of those things was we helped elevate succession gardens around the community when we thought that there was going to be food scarcity. We did not experience food scarcity in our town, which was really nice. We also had clothing drives for the homeless. We did cleanups. A lot of volunteer work brought a lot of members of the community together that wouldn't normally see each other. One of the other things I'm working on in terms of volunteer work in my free time, which is not very much time, so it's very slow going, but with the advent of new technologies, it's like able to move forward a little bit, is an app that I was trying to work on called Volunteer 5K, which gamifies your volunteer experience. So you can collect your hours, you can compete against other people, you can identify disparity gaps within your community, and then create organizations or find organizations already working towards those and volunteer towards those hours. The average hour, the value of the average volunteer hour in the state of Michigan, last time I checked, was $27.50 an hour. And that's equity in your community. So if you were able to track not just your equity in your community, but at the same time bridge disparity gaps for free, is that something you would be into? And if you could do it better than everybody else, wouldn't that be cool too? So that's like another thing that I'm working on if you have free time and you want to help me out. So in 2016, the presidential election changed me. I literally was like, holy they are going to let anybody be president. And I was moved like in a humorous way. At this time, I had never voted in a local election. The only local election I voted in prior to me being elected was the one before, so that I could see what I was like. Because I was very, very naive when it came to politics. I thought local politics, like local seats, were more like PTO, where like you volunteer and like, you know, I remember reading about it and it was like 7 required hours a month. And I was like, oh, well, that seems like a board position. So I was very naive. So I decided to run for office. And thank you. I wanted to see if I could use my marketing expertise and knowledge, and there was a lot that I know now that I didn't know then, which I'm about to share with you this evening, to see if I could get into office, to see if it was possible. Truly, anybody could get into office. And I did it as a bit. Like, I was passionate about politics. I didn't discover that the world was set up against me until the recession. And then I got very involved in, oh my God, this is perimenopause, my brain is freezing. But, you know, the giant protests after the banks, that big one. Oh, the Occupy movement, there we go. So we occupied Lansing, me and my family back here. We went on every protest that we could. I was just like, oh my God, I'm never gonna get out of this. And I'm just like, no way. And I was very motivated by the numbers and the multitudes of people that I saw in the street. And I really felt like there was something that I could do. So I did have a passion for that, but not in terms of politics, because I didn't really think that it was even possible for me. So I focused my energy on just using social media and just kind of reaching my generation. And the reason for that is I used some of my data analytics background to check into my community of nearly 30,000 people. 18,000 of those people were registered voters, and 60%, well, actually 18% of those people vote, and 60% of those people are over the age of 60. And so one of the things I learned in researching this is that a lot of cities who were affected by the recession, who haven't clearly bounced back and they don't have a lot of resources, their elections, their city growth and everything is greatly affected by their resources going into first responder programs, because everybody who's voting is older, and so a lot of the resources go into that. Well, in my particular city, they were bouncing back from the recession and things were looking really good until COVID hit. So this kind of all like compiled in one. So I wanted to use my marketing background to see if I could run for office. I started attending city council meetings for a year before I actually announced that I was going to run for office. I needed to see if I could fit it into my time schedule, if it was really 7 hours. Also, I didn't understand anything that they were saying. There's a lot of ritual, there's a lot of Robert's rules, even more that I don't understand, and I couldn't, like, I needed to be able to understand the language if I wanted to do it. So I wanted to identify with my generation, and I wanted to be able to get them to vote. And I didn't really do a get out to vote, and no one ever even really pointed this out before. So this is like something that people discover later on when they were like, she doesn't even take this seriously. But for me, I modeled my campaign off of my favorite politician, and this was someone who represented a lot of positive change. And at this time, I was very naive and thinking like, yeah, we're all just gonna get organized and fix everything. So this was me in office, and they were kind enough after I got in to take my picture with the laser background, but they did not put that on the website. So this is what it looked like. The person that I beat in office had been in office for 26 years, and everybody like kind of in office, minus the city manager, had kind of been in office for a while. So I was an anomaly. I won my election by just 3 votes. And when 3 votes, probably me and him and like one other person. But we did use the hashtag 1 of 3, and we got, like, that went really well. And so it was unbelievable. I didn't believe it. I cussed a lot that day. Nobody else believed it, so they did a recount, and I filmed the recount live on Facebook while the elected officials explained what the recount process was, which was like one of the most fascinating experiences of my life. When there was an anomaly, they stopped everything, and we were filming close up, and they were explaining the anomaly. The mayor is in the comment section giving a play-by-play. It was like one of the most exciting moments of my life, and I was for sure like, I'm definitely gonna lose, but this is, you know, at least we're gonna get it on thing. Like 3 votes is insane. So then I had to be on city council. And so I didn't win that city council seat like most people do. I did it differently. I only used social media. And so traditional campaigns, they print out a bunch of stuff, they raise a bunch of money, they go door to door. I just used Facebook. Thank you so much. Oh my God. So the reason why, there's so much more. So the reason why I only used Facebook was because I could reach more people exponentially, essentially. And if I showed up at someone's door looking like this, being that 60% of everyone who votes is over the age of 60, they're definitely not gonna vote for me. So I chose Facebook because it's community-based. It's based on who you know. The algorithm shows you stuff based on who you know and who you follow and who you engage with. And so it's also hyper-local. I can find my community groups in Facebook. I can identify my actual city, my street name, like everything else. Like everyone sort of compiles themselves into groups there. And so what did I learn from doing that? Well, I girl bossed too close to the sun. It's not an experience I ever want to have again. But I did learn how to identify problems within the community fairly quickly and easily. Like data collection is not hard, and with the advent of AI, it's like way easier. I learned how to analyze local engagement data and recognize the patterns so that I could find out the members of the community who are most likely to get information out there, engage with them exclusively, and start to build these organizations. These are people from all walks of life, intergenerational, both sides of the aisle. These are just people who want the same things in the community. And then I learned how to use that momentum to bridge disparity gaps within the community using volunteer work. Mostly I learned what connects us all as neighbors, what connects us all like as a community, and communities vary in nature. How similar all of our wants and needs are, and then that you can do more as a citizen than you can do as an elected official. In the early days, people would, like, when you think way back in the early days of how we communicate each other, how we pass on information, how we organize, started off as just people walking around talking to people. Paul Revere was the one who was sent out on the horse because he was the most well-known person in the community, so people trusted what it was he had to say. So community engagement is like how we connect with each other, and people think about that in different ways, and my use on the internet helps me see it as like a broader, like more powerful thing. I also learned how to identify these shared goals and gaps. I feel like I've backed away a lot from this type of activism to focus on what I'm trying to do in my career, but I do use my career to focus on activism and focus on community growth as well. And if you have questions about that later, I'm happy to tell you. And then I learned how we can mobilize each other to take action in crisis by the way we communicate, specifically on the internet. And so we are a product of our environment. I will go to, shows sort of like what we believe is our reality, and this is in meme form, so this allows us to take this very lightly versus like what is actually true. The media would have us believe that in times of crisis, we all turn on each other. This is the first time I looked at this cover since watching this movie, and we watched it during COVID just to be like, whoa. I did not realize that tagline was there, and I was like, holy, this is gonna be great. Okay, so our parents were right. Everything we see on the internet, every piece of content we consume, everything is rotting our brains, and it's shaping our reality, and we don't yet have a lot of control over the way it gets into our brains. We do, but I don't think we realize that we do. And so we're a product of our shared environment based on the content we consume, which creates the reality around us, which is why there are people in the world whose reality is so vastly different from what we think it is or should be, and it's frustrating both sides. So we become the content we consume. Mirror neurons, this is my segue into mirror neurons. So mirror neurons are thought to be like the very first form of communication. I only have 2 examples here, so I hope I'm getting the intergenerational, but who's seen Clan of the Cave Bear? Clan of the Cave Bear, when Daryl Hannah is learning how to count, no words, like crazy. The other movie I would use as an example is Babel. Babel uses 5 different languages, and they don't use subtitles, so you're relying on your brain to figure out what it is they're trying to communicate and how they're all related to each other. So mirror neurons happen when we see something, someone perform an action, and we can feel what they observe, or we can observe it. We start feeling the same thing, and that builds an interneurological connection between us. That's when we see a meme, everything you guys seen before here that made you laugh, you have some relational aspect to it. So this is mirror neurons working in real time. This guy, this is another great example. Who knows who this guy is? Yeah, everybody knows who this guy is. This guy doesn't even use words on his channel. He just shows concepts that we all can relate to, and he's the most followed person on TikTok. Very positive, happy guy. So the point that I'm trying to get at is that we use all different forms of communication to connect to each other. I find the internet and its use and the language that we use on the internet between our music, between our memes, between our videos, and everything else, one of the most effective forms of communication. When we look at a GIF or a meme, whenever it is placed in a comment section, it's evoking multiple emotions, multiple things at once. It's evoking your pop culture references, a very niche something, but it evokes something, and it draws people together, whether it be good or bad. So how do you put this into action? One of the things I wish that I could force everybody to do is just only post positive content all the time and never look at the news. A lot of everything you see is marketing, but it is reality and it's existing, and you can't remove yourself from it. So you have to learn how to receive information, and you have to learn how to curate information so that you can still function as a member of society who can work with your community to get us out of this fucking hellhole that we're all in. So when you curate the content that you're looking at, and I'm not saying don't look at the bad stuff, but start putting stuff together that is going to draw you towards other people, that'll motivate you to do more things, and then you will start to find yourselves in situations doing little things a couple hours a week that are helping to bridge disparity gaps between your community. It doesn't really cost you anything but your time, but there are, well, this isn't, but there's strength in numbers. We'll get to that later. So when you're talking about content that evokes emotion or brings people together, one of the things that I wanted to show is this picture. This picture evokes a lot of emotion for everybody. Okay, yeah. Okay, I'll skip skip through that one. I'm going to skip through that one. Strength in numbers. So when we all work together to do that, for instance, Facebook, when you have a friend on Facebook and they see your stuff, 5 other people are more likely to see that stuff. And so if the only thing you can do on the internet is share information and curate your stuff so that everybody around you is starting to pick up what you're laying down, that would be the bare minimum. And so that's where this comes from. Currently, I try to fit as much of this social work into my business as I can. We provide furniture for people exiting homelessness for free. We provide training for free. We provide access to my studio for free. I am there 7 days a week and I can't leave, so that is the least that I could do. And that's everything that I already just talked about. This is just the reading list that I would suggest, some of the stuff that I read, because the internet was really great in discussing internet language and how people study it. And then one of the movies that I would suggest the most from this would be The Great Hack, which talks about how the 2016 presidential election was won using GIFs, memes, and misinformation. That's all. That's all I got for you guys. Thank you very much for being so patient.
Thank you. You'd think I would have learned the lesson from Steve, but I didn't. Here I am, now behind. Smarty Pints, if you haven't gotten your code yet, and if you haven't started playing the summer game yet, we still have a lot of summer left, so feel free to join just with that one. But definitely put next month's Nerd Night on your calendar. We'll see you. It is the latest it possibly can be in August. But we'll see you back here on August 14th. Have a great night, and make sure you tip your bartenders. Thanks.